And I will kick this off and say hello and welcome to the first episode of the Convention of States Michigan podcast. My name is Robin Riddell, and I am the State Communications Coordinator for Michigan and a co-host of this podcast.
Hi, my name is Kelly Olford. I am a district captain for Convention of States right here in Michigan. I live in St. Clair, in the St. Clair area, kind of in the southern part of the thumb there. I work within our Region 3. I'm also a Region 3 kind of communications team leader as well in the kind of leadership position within our region, as well as within the district. And I'm also a co-host, the other co-host of this podcast. In my spare time, I am a mother of two. I am a practicing attorney. I've got a small estate planning practice. So I enjoy being able to work with clients and put together wills and trusts and things like that for people. I also, my husband and I have a side hustle of some commercial and residential rental properties and that type of thing that we lease out to people, and I manage all of that fun stuff too in the kind of Port Huron thumb area there. So we are here today to introduce all of you to Convention of States Michigan and to all of the team that is behind us in the development and the production of this podcast that we are going to bring to you every single week. So we are excited to be able to bring this to you, and we're excited to share this first episode to be able to introduce everyone who has been working so hard to be able to get this thing up and running.
Thank you, Kelly. The mission of Convention of States, the mission is to build a team of self-governing activists to educate and inform our local communities about the positive potential of a convention of states. Now, before we get into a greater explanation, let's meet the rest of our podcast team members. By day, Dave Vigna is a practicing attorney in Milford, Michigan. He volunteers his time as a district captain and as a state content writer for Convention of States. As a member of this podcast team, Dave is instrumental in developing content and assisting with constitutional knowledge. Dave, why did you join Convention of States?
Great question, Robin. Well, I read Mark Levin's book, The Liberty Amendments, when it came out 6 or 7 years ago, maybe later now, and was really impressed with it. I thought it was the founders had provided the perfect solution for an out of control federal government, but also thought it was sort of hopelessly, it just wasn't going to work. I thought Americans were just too complacent to get together to call a convention of states and propose amendments. So fast forward, to the 2020 election, I had been noticing, that over the years, the federal government had been grabbing more and more power, leaving less and less to the states. And I was very upset about the 2020 election. And after a month of throwing Cheetos at my television, I decided to start finding out what I can do about it to help. And I went back to Convention of States. I found this website, which is a treasure trove of information. I'm a cynical lawyer, so I had all kinds of questions, all kinds of reasons why it wouldn't work. And that website answered every single one of them. And I became a devotee, and so signed the petition in January of 2021, became a district captain and a state content writer in March of that same year. And I'm absolutely convinced it's the only hope we have to save the republic.
I'm with you there. I feel the same way. I was in a very despondent place when I heard about Convention of States. I certainly don't have the history education to be able to go back and forth in the Constitution and art about stuff. But when I saw the letters, Article 5, Convention of States, written right in that original document, I felt hope for the first time in a very long time. So let me introduce you to the fourth member of our podcast team. Don Scott is retired from General Motors and lives in the Clio area. Don is the technical wizard of the podcast, creating our opens and closes, the set, as well as all of the other technical aspects of producing, writing, and distributing the podcast. So Don, what brought you in as a volunteer with Convention of States?
Well, much like the rest of you said, I came out of 25 years in the wholesale banking business, retired from there, went to work for General Motors, retired from there. Been a precinct delegate in a couple of the places that I've lived in the past, so it's kind of politically inclined. So then I got involved with a couple of campaigns. I got involved with George W. Bush's campaign. I was involved with Trump's campaign. And then when Trump lost, and then I met one of our regional captains and talked to him about Convention of States. And I'm like, you know what, that sounds like something I think that I can actually get involved with and do. So instead of sitting around and, like Dave said, throwing stuff at the television and my children listening to me complain all the time, I decided I was going to try and do something. So then I got involved with basically amateur videography and podcasting and that type of thing, and volunteered those services. And hopefully I'm not in over my head, and we'll get this thing off the ground and do better, do well with it. So on we go.
All right. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining in. I feel like we have some really top talent, and most of all, caring people here who just want to help take this message to Michigan. Kelly, let's talk about Convention of States, what it is, isn't.
Yep. Well, if you'd like me to start off, and then we can get some comments from our guests as well. Just kind of a brief overview of what Convention of States is. There's a big picture and a small picture, kind of national picture and a local picture. So big picture, we are a national grassroots organization. So we are a national nonprofit working within all 50 states, working to pass resolutions within each individual state legislature. So we are a national organization working at the local level to be able to pass resolutions within each state legislature to actually hold an actual convention of states based on an Article 5 convention. So Article 5, we're referring to Article 5 of the United States Federal Constitution. So the big one that's under glass in the National Archives in Washington, D.C. And within that Constitution, there are two different ways that we'll be able to pass amendments to the Constitution. With that, we are focusing, Convention of States project nationally focuses on that second method, which is allowing us to be able to gather together as states, as state legislatures, and sending delegates to actually hold an actual convention where that we would write up and negotiate and pass amendments to the U.S. Constitution. So we are working, just kind of a brief, to just kind of summarize real quick, we are a national organization working at the state and local level to get these resolutions passed. We have 19 of them passed so far, and we are working on, I think there was like 20 some other states that were working on their resolutions as well over the course of the next legislative session or so, something like that. So we're working within each of those states. And then once we get enough states, we'll be able to actually hold a convention and write up some proposed amendments to the U.S. federal Constitution. More importantly, I would like to maybe get a few comments on, from our guests and to how they interpret their role within Convention of States, and how they like to be able to see it and be able to describe it to people. And I would really like to hear from our guests as well, from our team, as to what Convention of States isn't going to do, or what wouldn't happen at a convention or something along those lines, to be able to address those as well. So Dave, why don't we start with you and maybe get your thoughts on what Convention of States is and isn't?
Sure. I think you did a great job of explaining what it is. I'll talk about what it isn't, but I want to just supplement your description for just a minute, because people get confused about this. That state convention, when it comes to pass, the Convention of States, all they are there to make proposals. They can't do anything. They can't amend the Constitution. They can do exactly what Congress could do today or next week or anytime they're in session. That is, make proposals that if they agree to the proposals and they fit within the three segments that have been outlined in our proposal, and that's been passed by the 19 states. If a majority of the delegates say yes to that, if they can agree on a form of an amendment, again, and we're talking about that surrounds term limits, federal jurisdiction, and spending. So they can talk about those three, but nothing else. And they propose, if they can get together on an amendment on any three, 1, 2, or 3, whatever they can agree on, those proposals go to the states for ratification. And it takes 38 states, 3/4 of the states to ratify it. Then it becomes part of the Constitution. But this becomes important, as you know, Kelly, later on, because people confuse a constitutional convention with an Article 5 convention of states. So then I just that's a good segue, I guess. What an Article 5 convention of states isn't is a constitutional convention like the one we had in Philadelphia in 1787.
Can I just say here, as I listen to that, I know there are people that are looking for a quick fix. Somebody like me who's been sitting for years, frustrated about this. You hear about this and you think, great, let's do this. But this is a long process. We have to have 34 states to agree to even get together and talk about it.
Right.
And we have to have the convention and talk about it and agree. And then that all has to go back to the states, and then 38 states approve it. So this isn't going to happen overnight, right?
Mark Meckler, the founder, one of the co-founders, likes to say, we're a 9-year overnight success. He's been at this for 9 years, and they're finally having some success with it. The founders meant it to be very difficult. They thought they'd created a great document, which they did, and they didn't want it to be altered willy-nilly. And just a quick little vignette here. They were 2 days, they'd agreed on the form of the Constitution, and 2 days before they were actually going to sign it, September 15th, the delegate, George Mason from Virginia, stood up and said, wait a minute, look at Article 5, fellas. It talks about the amending process for the Constitution, but nowhere in there, I mean, it gives the sole power to amend the Constitution to the Congress. Are any of you foolish enough to think if a Congress becomes overbroad and corrupt and large and a swamp, that they're going to correct their own excesses? And there was James Madison took copious notes. He said there was no debate. It was a headbanger. They said, of course. And within 2 days, our Article 5 provision says the states can do it as well, because they knew this day was coming. And that's what it's for. Yeah.
So Don, we've talked quite a bit now about kind of the national perspective of it, the kind of local perspective of it. Specifically, how does a convention of states matter for Michigan? Can you answer that for us?
Specifically for Michigan, because Michigan is under a huge amount of federal overreachment as far as our natural resources go. We don't have a lot to say what happens to the Great Lakes. We don't have a lot to say what happens to the pipelines that run through our state. Our governors in the past have been laydowns to the federal government and have not stood up for Michiganders' rights. We need somebody or some way to retake control of what happens to the future for our children. We have 8 kids, and I would love to know, and 3 grandbabies at this point, and I would like to think that we're going to leave something behind for them that is in some way, in any way, similar to the world that we grew up in. So for Michigan, I'm 4th generation Michigan, and I would love to know that my grandchildren will be able to live in the same state and country that I grew up in, with the same value system and the same securities. So that's why it's very important to hear. Michigan is rare in itself with the upper and lower peninsula. I don't know of any other state in the union that says, we're going to go up north, and up north is a vacation. you know. We have, the UP is a vast wilderness. I don't know if anybody's, from outside of Michigan has ever been up there, but you may see this. That's just, you can jump out of your car and get lost, relatively quickly. And, we're the only state in the union that goes, yeah, I live right here. So, but Michigan is, to us Michiganders, COS, the Convention of States, is probably even just a little bit more important. And unfortunately, we haven't passed it yet in Michigan. We came really close.
We will.
We're going to work on it.
Well, that's a good segue, actually, because my next question is this specifically for Robin, kind of getting back to a just kind of general Convention of States question here for Robin. Robin, what is your vision for this podcast? What would you like to see happen for all of us and for our audience as we launch into this podcast and get going with it on a weekly basis for everybody?
As the state's communication coordinator, I'm always looking for new ways as a nonprofit organization, so free ways to connect with people in our community. And we have outreach going on all over the state, but let's face it, people are busy. They might not have time. The kids have soccer that night that there's a town hall on. And podcasts are popular. They can go anywhere. I did a little research. I knew that how big our state was, but geographically, and Don, you touched on this, 97,990 miles with a population of about 10 million people. We're the 10th largest state in the United States. That's a little easy fact that I didn't know before I did the research. And our communities are diverse. Detroit, Michigan is so different from Sault Ste. Marie up in the Upper Peninsula. Or you take Escanaba and Benton Harbor. Couldn't be more different. What's universal about people in Michigan is our desire to preserve our freedoms, especially that of self-governance. And to me, Convention of States is that beacon of hope in a chaotic world. So if you can't get to one of our events or you aren't seeing our Facebook Live or receiving our emails, you can count on having this podcast to help bring information to you. And it's going to be interactive. We're going to give you an opportunity starting today to ask us questions. We want to answer the questions that you want answered. We are accountable here to you to assuage any fears you have, to give you the information you need to feel confident in signing that petition and or to come on board. We're expanding our grassroots. Our grassroots needs to be bigger, deeper, stronger. And it's the information that will get us there. So that is my long version of my vision for this podcast.
Let's see here. So at this point, I mean, we, as Robin just touched on too, we always want to be able to invite everyone to be able to come in and join with us in this movement. Step one in that, and this is one thing that I always emphasize too in my Facebook live streams, every other Thursday at 8 p.m. You can join us on Facebook Live. One of the biggest things that I emphasize with all of those as well is making sure you sign the petition. That is step one in all of this. You like everything that you're hearing, you like everything Don had to say, you like everything Dave had to say, you share Robin's vision for how you want to see Convention of States work within Michigan. The first thing you need to make sure you do is get that petition signed. So we'll be able to post that link for you. You can find it right on the Convention of States website, just on their regular national website, but we will get that link posted for you, so you can make sure you get that petition signed. that petition does a couple of things. First of all, what it does is it kind of gets you on our kind of mailing list, I guess, if you will, keeps you up to date on everything happening nationally and at the state level here in Michigan for all of the different events, all of the different great stuff that's happening with Convention of States. And the second thing that it does is actually sends a note based on the information that you enter into the petition. It sends a note to your specific state legislature, your state House rep and your state senator, to let them know that they have another constituent who now supports Convention of States. So it's really, really important too that it sends another message to Lansing that Convention of States has another member of their grassroots army. So really important step one is make sure you get that petition signed. And we will make sure that we somehow post that link to you to be able to get that. And if nothing else, you can make sure that you check out the just Convention of States website, and right at the top there is ways for you to be able to sign the petition. There's a link to it right at the top of the page.
So let me give you that website address, and maybe when we do an editing pass on here, we might be able to even put it on the screen. That could be big time. It is conventionofstates.com/Michigan. conventionofstates.com/Michigan. This podcast is created for you, the listener. We would like to answer your questions. So if you have one, please email us at askmichigan@cosaction.com. And let me spell that preface for you. It's askmi@cosaction.com. Once around the room, anything to say before we sign off on our first edition here?
I'm just really excited to be on board. I'm excited to see where this takes us, and I'm excited to be able to engage with the entire state of Michigan. So this is going to be really cool to be able to hear from everybody and be able to talk to everybody.
Thanks, Kelly.
If you were, as I was, if you were disappointed with the election results last week, that's another reason that COS is important to Michigan. And actually, it's important to states like Florida, because it restores federalism. And federalism is all about keeping most of the power with the states and the people, and a limited amount with the federal government. So the people in Michigan who didn't like the results presently, if they really don't like it, they can move to Florida or Texas or wherever they want to go. We're losing that as the federal government takes more power. They're making more of those decisions for you, so there won't be any distinctions between the various states. So we need to restore that. That's it. Glad you're doing this, Robin.
Thank
and
you.
Kelly.
Thank you. Don, any last words?
Yep. The one thing I would like to say in closing for this first podcast is that if you're watching this, you are part of the resistance. You are part of the grassroots organization. Spread the word, bring more people, talk to somebody. One of my favorite things to do, especially lately, is every time I fill my truck up with gas, I talk to somebody and I hand them a business card and I say, look, if you're sick and tired of this stuff, get involved, because they're not going to change it in Washington if we don't change it here first. Get involved. That's the best thing you can do. And this right here is one of the best places to do it, because a lot of people don't know. A lot of people have no idea. They're ticked off and they want to make a change and they have no idea where to go. Spread the word. This is a good place to start. That's it for me.
There you go.
Okay. Thank you all again. We'll be back next time with a new guest. See you then.
See you.